Hello and welcome to Megs & Co. in the studio, a channel that is all about yarn, and today we are going to be dyeing yarn. If it looks like we are actually all done, you're not wrong. This is actually going to be a little bit of an extra bonus episode, a part 2 to a little bit of work that I did yesterday and filmed, so you can go and check that video out. Yesterday, I worked on dyeing up my own little countdown collection using mini skeins. I dyed 16 different tonal colorways using mason jars to keep all of my mini skeins separate so that we could get all of these beautiful colors on these mini skeins pretty quickly. And I had an idea overnight, popped into my head when I should have been sleeping, on how I could use up the little bit of extra dye that I had for each of these colors, and how we could dye the rest of the package. So the package came with 25 mini skeins and we only dyed 16. So I have an idea on a really great way to finish out this collection using up the rest of the dye and coming up with some really fun variegated colorways that I think are really going to round out this countdown for yourself or for a friend. So if that sounds like fun, let's get to work. So we are working with mini skeins from Knomad yarns. I'll show you the package label again. Knomad Yarns is a great yarn distributor. If you are looking to get into yarn, if you're a yarn dyer and looking for a new distributor, I highly recommend you check them out. Full disclosure, Knomad did send me this package for me to dye and to write up a tutorial for their blog. So I did receive this yarn, but I love their yarn so very much. So this is Clover DK Minis. It is 100% fine merino wool, 20 grams per skein, and it is DK weight. I absolutely love that these are DK weight minis and that they are non-superwash minis. If this was going to be my set, I would absolutely be casting on some sort of like doodle, because I love doing color work with non-superwash yarn, and I am all about the doodles. I mentioned it on my previous video. I have a Discord channel and we are kind of doing a very unofficial little doodle along, but that's not why we're here. So it is countdown season. We're counting down the year. We're counting down to our favorite holidays. Maybe it's Thanksgiving, maybe it's Christmas, maybe it's solstice, maybe it's the Super Bowl. I don't know. But countdown boxes seem to be everywhere, popping up in my feed. I actually just finished opening up a Halloween countdown box, which was so much fun to kind of kick off fall and my favorite season. And I love the idea of opening up a little package, a little gift for yourself every single day to count down to an event that means something to you. And I love that you can buy a package of mini skeins, then it comes in a package of 25, and it's such a good number that you can use the whole package and create a countdown for yourself or for a friend. And I thought it would be a really cool idea if you dyed one for your friend and then your friend could dye one for you and you could do a swap. And how cool would that be? So we've got 16 tonal colorways in these jars. They're completely done. They've completely cool room temperature overnight. I did want to show you these two jars. These were the two that were taking the longest to exhaust. So when I cut off filming yesterday, these two jars still had not completely exhausted, and I said I was just going to leave them on the heat for like 15 more minutes and then just let them cool overnight. And then I was pretty confident that they would exhaust with a long exposure to heat. It's been about 10 hours. So you can see the water has maybe a slight tint to it, ever so slight, but that is fully exhausted. This is the aubergine, the very dark kind of brownish purple colorway that we did. And you can see how very saturated this is. There's a lot of dye in there. And then let's check our blue. This was the other one that was taking a very long time. And again, yeah, that's fully exhausted. If I'm really looking at it again, I can tell that there was a blue skein in there, but that's clear water. And I'm good with that. Again, for how saturated this skein is, that is good, clear, exhausted water. And so, yeah, all of these are perfectly clear. So my idea for today, I had mixed up a little bit of extra of all of my dyes. And so I'm just going to move these jars out. I mixed up a little bit of extra of all of these dyes. And a lot of that is just because when you start measuring very teeny tiny amounts on the scale, it's hard to get very consistent results the smaller you go on the scale. If you're not worried about repeatability, totally fine. You know, it's fine to just measure the exact amount that you need. And just know that if you wanted to repeat it, your colors just might look a little different because your scale is going to be wobbling a little bit. So for me, I like to make sure that I'm getting as a repeatable colorway as I possibly can. So usually I don't even like to measure below 1 gram, but for this I did measure half a gram, and then we put it in 50 milliliters of water. And then we only used 22 milliliters for every dye. So we should have about 28 it's early in the morning, guys, when I'm filming this. We should have about 28 mils of water left over. A little bit might have evaporated overnight as it was just sitting here. So, you know, let's just call it 25. And we have all of those mixes that we mixed up. We mixed up 8 different colors. So that's quite a bit of dye. So I had an idea that I thought it would be fun that we created kind of a full, pretty much a full rainbow spectrum of colors. And I thought it would be really fun to create some variegated colors that connect our tonals. So to start adding multiple of these colors to the skeins, you know, so that if you wanted to create maybe like a fade or something like that, you could kind of, you know, cycle your variegated skeins in between your tonal skeins, and have like some really cool fabric effects. Or you could have just 2 very different mini skein sets, and that's kind of the really fun part about doing this. You could have a tonal collection and a variegated collection, and they're going to match each other or be 2 completely different collections. Love it. So I'm going to put some gloves on so that we can get our hands wet. So we already have a pan of water here. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just use this pan. It's just water. The water is probably a little grayish because we were kind of rinsing our spoon in it, but I'm not really going to worry about that. I'm fine if there's, you know, a little runoff of dye. It doesn't look like it's like truly stained water. I don't think it's going to be a problem. If anything, it's just going to add a little interest. So I set up another soaking bucket. So whenever we're working with non-superwash yarn, you'll always want to make sure that you are giving these a good wash and soak. So last night I tied these up again with using a ribbon around the center to secure, and then set them up in a warm bucket of Synthropol just to help pull any dirt and spinning oils off of them, and set them up in the bucket. So they've been soaking overnight. And I'm going to put them in this pan. And let's see if I can do this with the water in the pan. So I kind of had this idea to lay them in the pan in a way that they will Here, I'll show you with the second one. To arrange them in the pan in the way that they kind of snake in and out of each other. So here's the end of the one, and I'm putting it in between the other one. So they kind of interlock like little Lincoln logs, kind of, if that's making sense. So I made like a little C shape with one, and then took the other one and made another C shape and locked it in like that. And I'm gonna keep making those shapes so that they kind of snake through each other. And the idea with that is that as we pour our colors, it'll create, you know, kind of like a gradient effect of color across these skeins, so that each skein will have a little bit of these colors, and they should gradually fade from one color to the next. Okay, here we go, and put this in here. So ideally this would be a lot easier to arrange if there was no water in your pan, because you can see as they're kind of floating around, it's a little flimsy. Just trying to reuse some of this water. And we have quite a few skeins here. Because we're going to do the rest of the package. So we have, I believe, 9 skeins left over. Let's see, just kind of move these up. And it's okay if it's not perfect, because it's all gonna flow. If you ever have skeins that get kind of tangled in the water, you can always use the water to actually untangle it. So a reason why I like these ties is these ties tell you where the center is. So you can just move your skein along that tie. And so any of those strands that seem to have kind of flipped the other way should sort themselves out. And if you literally just give it a gentle dunk, the water running up and down the length of those strands will literally sort that yarn right back out for you. It'll use gravity to your advantage and re-tidy your skein. So don't get nervous if you pull it out and you see that it's become tangled. Just stop, use your center tie to refine that center, push everything back into place, and then give it a few dunks in the water to redistribute all of your strands, and then just get right back to work. It's especially helpful when you're washing. Washing tends to be where a lot of those strands get flipped around, and so I'm kind of constantly moving my zip tie or my ribbon tie, however I've chosen to attach the yarn or attach the tie to the yarn, constantly moving that around and then doing those slow dips so that I'm not getting tangles, because nobody wants tangled yarn. Okay, so everything's arranged in the pan. It's probably hard to see each individual skein, but they are all kind of snaked in and out of each other. So I am going to, what are we gonna do? I'm gonna need some citric acid. That's what we're gonna need. Ideally, I would have, it's better to add this to the water bath first and then to stir rather than adding this on top of the yarn. But here we are. So add this to your water bath first and then add the yarn. You just don't want like those clumps and crystals of citric acid to be just like sitting on the yarn. You want a nice distribution of acid. So I'm just going to use my hands to gently kind of mix that acid around, since I'll blame it on lack of coffee. Like I said, it's still early in the morning. So usually I set my pans up and I have like this routine where I fill all my pans, I put my acid in all the pans, and so I'm recycling a pan and it's thrown me off. It's all good. So I'm just going to use my hands to just mix that citric acid in so we don't have it just sitting on top of the yarn. But you're not going to do what I did. You're going to add your citric acid to the water first. But if you forgot, you can do this too. Okay. So I'm going to put the heat on. Whenever I do variegated colorways, I like to work with hot yarn. I like when I'm pouring color, I want that color to be striking fast so that it's not moving around the pan. The faster that it's striking, the less that it's moving around the pan, and the less time it has to interact with other colors and, you know, kind of turn to mud essentially. I want it to mix and mingle with some colors, but the more mixing and mingling it does, the more brown and mud. And you can see we're going to be adding a lot of dye. So we'll work slow, we'll give each dye time, you know, to really fix to the yarn. But we're going to add heat because the heat is going to help with the time component. We don't have to sit and wait forever. So, oh, my little pan cam was trying to run away from me here. So let's get the heat going. So I'm just going to let this heat up probably about a good half hour. I'm going to go get a cup of coffee and I'll meet you right back here.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
I think it's time to check and see where we're at and start putting some color on this. Let me get my gloves on. Oh yeah, nice and hot. I'm gonna turn my pan around. So just because of the electricity limitations in this room, I can only have one side of my heating tray on at a time when I have both of these going, and I did set up a second pan. We'll get to that in a minute. So I just rotate them when I'm in this room to just kind of keep the heat even. So let's get going. So we've mixed up all of these dyes yesterday. Unfortunately, we labeled them as well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in kind of rainbow order. And the reason to do that is it's a very easy way to ensure that the colors that you place next to each other, that when they mix and run into each other, that they're going to create new colors that are going to blend very nicely and make nice, good colors, so to speak. So this is where we want to pull out that color wheel and think about, how colors are made. So we have our 3 primary colors, and we make all of our colors from those 3 primary colors in the color wheel. So just like orange is made from red and yellow, we can pour, we want to essentially be pouring to make those nice colors. So if we pour a pink, a red, an orange, a yellow, they're all going to kind of run into each other to create nice different shades of complementary colors. When you start getting into colors that are opposite the color wheel, so by opposite of the color wheel, red and green are opposite of the color wheel. So you can pour red next to green, but you just have to be a little bit more careful, because when those dyes start to connect to each other, the colors that they make can sometimes not be very desirable. You're going to start getting browns, and not that that's a bad thing, but if you're going for sharp, crisp colors, you don't necessarily want those in between muddy colors. Sometimes those in between muddy colors can actually be so surprisingly beautiful. So don't be afraid of mixing your colors. Don't be afraid of putting red next to green. I do think that you should experiment with your color placement and experiment with mixing your colors. You can have some really beautiful and interesting effects. And when we start pouring these, you are going to see that all those colors are going to start running into each other. So bits of red are going to be running into our bits of green. But again, by kind of keeping a rainbow order, you're going to have a more like natural progression. Nature knows what it's doing, and we are just going to follow nature's cue by following what it knows best. And that's how we're going to know that we should be able to successfully lay colors next to each other without them kind of canceling each other out. Or looking too brassy, or, just not matching each other, if that's making sense. Okay, so this is not labeled. So this is the green that we made at the very end. So we have green, teal. So teal is a little bit more like blue leaning. We've got our aubergine, which is purple. We've got blue, salmon, that's like kind of our orange, so to speak. Ooh, pecan. Pecan's like a brown, but we'll put that as our yellow. We've got our tobacco. That's also kind of like a brownish. That's like, I bet that would be really pretty next to teal. We'll put that next to teal. Okay. This is like hard to do with this little bit of room. Okay, so salmon goes there, and then we have plum. So plum is going to be kind of like a red. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fill all of these containers up. So right now these dyes are very concentrated. I didn't need to fill them up that much, but they're very concentrated. And so when we pour, I don't necessarily want to be pouring such concentrated color because we can always add a little bit more. But it's hard. Oh my gosh, that went everywhere. But it's harder to take color away. So essentially by adding water is your way of adding white. So you're just diluting these down a little bit. So that way, we can pour and not as much dye is being introduced into the pan. by just pouring a little bit. So, okay. Filling them up, and that's all the water I have, so that's all they get. Okay, where is I wanted to start with purple. I'm going to start with purple at the very top. Give this a good mix. It's been sitting overnight, so I want all that dye to get back up at the top. I'm actually going to start with purple. The reason for that, so normally like blue goes to purple, but just my experience with working with this particular color of aubergine and the blue steel, because they're both so dark, I worry that it'll just kind of turn into a little bit, a little too dark, if that's making sense. So I'm gonna kind of balance the two colors by putting aubergine on one end and the blue steel on the other end of our color spectrum for a little bit of balance. So essentially what I want to do is we've got, how many colors we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So in my head, we've got 8 colors. So I want to just essentially divide the pan by 8, and I'm going to just be pouring 8 lines. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, just 8 stripes. Phone was having a little moment there. Okay. 8 stripes. That's 1. Plum. Try to put these back in some sort of order. This is salmon. And then I'm using this whisk to, I always like to kind of push in the edges of the color so that you have a bit more of a gradient for how the color is laying on the yarn. Right, so what's our next color? Our next color would be, I really want to put that tobacco next to the teal because I think it's going to be really pretty. So I'm going to put the pecan next. And there's our tobacco. Teal. Forest. see as the water's getting higher, the more opportunity for that dye to really float around to other places. And that's okay. The idea is to have that gradient shift, and because our skeins are snaked in and out, we should have a nice gradient effect when we pull all these apart. So now if there's any spots that, you know, look like, you know, maybe you want a little bit more color, now's the time to kind of add that. So I think at the top, I think I want, you know, a little bit more purple here. Because of how we added these skeins, it's going to be very difficult to flip this over. So a lot of times, you know, I will dye one side and then flip it over to dye the other side. That's not going to happen with this, just because of how we arranged this. So I'm going to go just a little bit darker on this side, because the other side is actually going to have quite a bit of white space because we're not going to get to it, which I think is going to add some even more fun interest. It's already looking so cool. Like, so you can see like there's areas in here where the dyes are starting to mix. Okay, I think if I keep adding more dye, like I'm gonna start getting some kind of muddy effect. So let's let that sit and cook. And I had hinted that I had set up another pan. So I had figured that I was gonna have still quite a bit of dye left over. So I did set up another pan. This is just some superwash yarn. This is fingering weight, 100% superwash merino yarn. This is a yarn that I use a lot for my Wildflower batches. It's a very great all-purpose yarn, nice and soft, you know, kind of ideal for all your projects, whether it's sock yarn, sweaters, whatever you want. So because it's such like a nice like all-purpose yarn, I like to use it for my Wildflower batches. So I knew I was going to have quite a bit of leftover dye, so I was like, I think it's time to do a Wildflower batch, and I wanted to show you how I do it. And how I do it is kind of very similar to what we just did. I'm just going to take the dye and kind of just have fun, just use up my dye. Honestly, I really like the color pattern that was happening there. So I kind of want to repeat it a little bit. So let's just do that. So I'm just putting aubergine at the top. I think I'm going to save a little smidge, because this one we can flip over. Oh, I didn't save any of that one. Okay. All right, I guess we're just going to use it all. I don't know if I want to use... Oh, that's so cool. So I skipped the pecan just because I just don't want it to like mute down. Oh, that's fun. I don't want it to mute down things. Pecan is a very beautiful color, but it can have a very muting effect. And for this, I think we want bright colors. Like, what a fun, happy rainbow here. And I love how like that blue kind of flew forward, and it's going to create some really fun colors up there. This is also such a great way to see how your dyes might interact and create colors that maybe you want to explore a little bit. So you can see, you know, how does your teal and forest green and steel blue mix together, and because these little intermediate colors that they create, they're so unique. Oh, this is going to be so pretty. All right, so yeah, we're just going to let both of these cook. We want to make sure that everything is fully exhausted. This is definitely going to take a while. Non-superwash yarn always takes a little bit longer than superwash yarn to exhaust. So this is probably going to exhaust pretty quickly. But I'm going to heat both of these for another 20-25 minutes and then come back down and check. I'm not going to disturb this at all until it's completely exhausted. But then we can kind of pull it apart and see what we have. I will check the other side and see, you know, as long as it's not like too bare or too spotty, I think it's going to be fine, because it's having that underside will create kind of natural resists and natural interest. But as long as it's, you know, you want to make sure it looks intentional and not a mistake. You don't want it to be, you know, blotches of absent color in your fabric. You want it to enhance your fabric. So we'll definitely give it a good look. We'll examine it, make sure that it's the right amount of absence of color. And maybe we'll speckle it if we think it just needs a little bit more. And yeah, and then same thing with our Wildflower batch. So I actually do have some other colors that I brought over from my normal dye studio that left over from the week. So I can keep adding to it. We'll flip it over to that other side and we can keep adding to it, and then maybe put some speckles on it as well. So check back soon. Are you ready to check the pans? Because I sure am. This is always such an exciting part, to see what everything looks like. I'm really excited about this. I think that this is just going to look so cool. Oh yeah. Absolutely amazing. So happy with this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Like that meme. Okay. So I've had 3 cups of coffee now, because I've had all this time to like just wait for these pans. Which was a mistake, because now yeah, now I'm like a little crazy, but oh my goodness. This is so good. So, yeah, we're done. We are absolutely done, and we'll really get to see this once it's dry. But yeah, this is exactly what essentially I had in my head of, we have a gradient of colors that beautifully flow into each other because of how we layered, and where's the next one? Maybe like this one. Because of how we layered our skeins together by kind of, let's see how this is the next one, by like snaking them together and then pouring our dyes in the same, this one just a little connected to its friend there, but that's okay. but yeah, and then pouring our dyes like in the same way that they were laying on each other, so to speak. So then that way the colors gradually shifted down the pan as the yarn was snaking. So you get this gradual shift of color. And these colors should match our solid tonal colors that we dyed in the previous video. So if you wanted to use this set as just a standalone gradient set, it'll be absolutely gorgeous in a project. Or if you wanted to then kind of mix and match with the tonal colors to have more of like a fade effect, or to put like stripes in between these variegated skeins. There's so many possibilities that you could do. And the effects are so neat. And again, to have this as, like if you were going to make this as like a countdown, it would be so neat to be able to like open up one of these variegated skeins and then open up one of your tonal skeins. Yeah, and you can, I'm so happy with this. Like you can just see kind of where the different dyes, hit and separated. So you just got some really neat effects. And so you can just look at your skeins, and if there's a skein that, you potentially wanted to work on a little bit more, you can do that. I know these two are like, don't want to give each other up. There we go. So these two are just a little close in color. I would say if anything, potentially I want to add a little bit more blue just to this very last one, and only because it's just so close to its partner here, that just to kind of make it a little different. But what do we got here? Oh no, he's kind of half and half. So I think if anything, I might do that. So I think I'm going to leave him in the pan. Just going to put these in here. These are, there's not enough room in there. Okay, not going to do that. Put them in a bigger vessel. So these are completely done. Normally I would just leave these in the pan to completely cool. But because I want to keep working, I'm just going to put these over here for now. Totally fine. And let's work on this. So I've used up all my blue, but we really only need a little bit. So here's a really fun way that we're going to add just a little bit of blue to just a portion of this skein. So this is the blue steel that we mixed up, and I'm going to take just a pinch, and just like we speckled, I'm going to just speckle the water, and I'm going to rinse my fingers. So I don't know, we're not measuring here, it's just a pinch. And essentially, I just want that to kind of go on the one end, just to make this one a little bit different and a little bit darker, and more blue compared to the other one, just so that it stands out a little bit more. So that's just kind of, especially because this is definitely a very like one-of-a-kind collection that we're creating here. These are those fun ways that you can just kind of very quickly, very easily make a very quick change. And whew, this is hot. So I'm holding this end out of the water because I really wanted, I wanted the other end to have more blue, just to kind of keep the variegated look. Let's see what's around me. So, use what's around you. You can actually, there. Very hot. So I'm going to actually do that. I just kind of tucked the top of this into my measuring container, so that way the tail end can hang out in this water, and have a little bit of extra time with the blue. and then I'll probably throw the whole thing in, but that way we can get some like more, just some more variation. So while that is cooking, I want to keep an eye on that, and I want to kind of keep feeding this in and out of the water because I don't want a harsh line. I always hate kind of harsh break lines in the color. I think that those lines just show up a little bit too abruptly in your fabric. So I always want a nice gradual transition of color. So I'm going to be kind of moving the skein in and out of the water. But we can go and check in on this pan, which absolutely looks amazing as well. So let's see here, there's still quite a bit of color in the water. This end is clear, and this end is actually the end that's on the heat. So we might just need to, oh my gosh, it's heavy, do a little flip to, and try to not dump this hot water all over the floor. Okay. Yeah, so this side is the hotter side. So it makes sense that this end of the pan, you can see that everything's exhausted. It's nice and clear. But this end just needs a little bit more time and probably just a little bit more heat. I think that little shock of heat, that little increase in temperature should be enough to drive that that final bit of dye in pretty quickly. And I'm also just opening up these strands to also just kind of help find bare areas of that yarn, that any kind of like bare area is ready and available to take that dye up as well. So it'll kind of help speed things up as well. Superwash yarn. Superwash yarn has been chemically treated to be heat resistant so that it can be washable. I still recommend to never put your yarn in a wash machine. I just think that agitation just never does good things for loose strands, never does good things for your fabrics that you have spent so much time knitting, crocheting. It always just seems to disturb the fabric. And then never put it in the dryer either. Just even though it is heat resistant, again, when you're adding in the tumbling and the heat, I just don't think good things happen. All that to say is that this yarn can definitely take a lot more abuse in terms of how we manipulate it. So you might see that I'm kind of being a little bit more aggressive as I'm kind of jabbing it with the tongs, because it really can take a lot more of a beating than our non-superwash yarn can take. Non-superwash yarn, the scales have not been cleaved and sealed, so anytime that those strands are rubbing up against each other is an opportunity for them to felt together. So we just want to be careful that we're, just allowing the strands to gently stay floating and relaxed and not rubbing. With superwash yarns, those scales have been cleaved and sealed. So there really isn't a risk of them felting together. So we can be a little bit rougher. And that's why I always say that starting your yarn dyeing journey is always easier with superwash yarn, because you kind of don't have to worry about, the felt factor, so to speak. But you can definitely start with either. So yeah, so that little bit of heat, you can see the water has maybe like a gray tint to it, but we are pretty much exhausted. And, yeah, so here's the front. And here is that underside. One of the things I like to do sometimes is, this is actually 5 skeins. I've got 3 on this zip tie and 2 on this one. A lot of times I like to kind of rotate them so that the inside skeins are now the outside skeins. And then I can lay them back down. And let's see if we want to, what we want to do here. And this is beautiful. absolutely beautiful. I gotta be honest, I don't like want to do much because it is stunning. So I do have some of these dyes. So as I'm working through my week, as I have leftover dyes, I just leave them, and some of them will even kind of dry up and form just these little crystals. And I need water. I'll be right back. I need water. And you can very easily just resuscitate these just by adding some nice hot water. And they'll come right back. So I didn't label these. I don't know what they are. It's a lot of mystery here. This one looks like it was maybe like an emerald green. So I don't know that I want to put that in here. Maybe I do. Maybe just on like... Okay, yeah, I do. I'm just kind of adding this emerald green to areas that are already kind of bluish and green. And it was very dilute already, so there really wasn't much there. So that was wonderful. And there was just a teeny tiny amount of teal and that tobacco that were just kind of lingering at the bottom of these containers that I had mixed in as well. Leave no dye behind. I'm going to take all my sticky tags off. It's a nice way to kind of clean up at the end of the day, start finally consolidating down some of this mess. Okay, so here's another container. It's got some blue here at the bottom. Ooh, okay, I think this was like an aqua. And so this is actually going to add some really fun brightness to this batch. See, this is so much fun. This is why I love doing my wildflower batches. You just really don't know what you're going to get. And again, these are just all the colors that I just happened to be working with this week. And no measurements, totally random, no idea what I'm going to get, you know, so cannot be repeated. Let's see here. This one is like a reddish color. Let's see, I gotta mix this up. I can have some settling in there. I just don't want this to be like too dark, so I'm just gonna be very kind of careful and selective about where and how much I'm pouring, because sometimes my leftover dyes can be like too concentrated, and you know, I don't want it. I want to have lots of color in here. You know, so I don't want it to like take it over. So, you know, you're just kind of like just painting a little abstract painting here. Just adding little bits of color, and again, just kind of following your color theory. So, you know, just being careful about pouring colors on top of colors that potentially may not mix nicely. So I like to pour, you know, reds on purples, reds on orange. You can pour reds next to greens and blues. But I try to avoid like directly mixing them all together, because then you end up, so it's just all pink, and I'm going to save that for another day because we've got a lot of reds in here. You don't want to end up with a pan that's all one color, and sometimes if you just start pouring one on top of the other, you are just going to, that's like basically empty. So nothing was in that one. That was a bummer. I have no idea what this one is. Ooh, this might be some kind of green. Yeah, so you just don't want to end up with a pan that's just like all one color, essentially. Because if you're just pouring color on top of color, you're not going to get your little individual spots. All right, so yeah, this is like a really pretty green. So let's put some green here and here. Another thing to watch out for is you can see my actual pan is starting to get very full of water. So eventually I'll have to just stop and let everything exhaust, and if I need to remove water, I can if I wanted to keep adding more color. Or usually that's just kind of when I call the batch good and done. I feel like this one little area, let's see. And we only have like 2 left. I really want to use up. Ooh, that's another green. I don't know if I want to add more green. What's this one? Red. Red and green. I needed like a middle color. I was hoping for like more blue, but all right, we'll put a little spot of green here. That's pretty. And how about ooh, this one's actually more of like a pinky. Okay. I think we're good. I'm going to call it because I think we're going to start getting some like muddier colors if we keep going any longer. But yeah, that's a wildflower batch. That was so much fun. So much fun. So I still have I still have these dies left over, which is totally fine. They will be tucked away and saved for my next one. A lot of times what I'll do is that when I have similar colors, so like 2 reds or 2 purples, I will actually just mix them together so that I can kind of conserve my containers. Again, following the color chart, if you mix a red and a green together, you've just made brown. But like you can combine, basically you can combine your cool colors together. So like blues and greens go really well together in a single container. Reds, purples can go really well together. You can do yellows and greens in the same container. So it's really up to you how many, containers you want to keep going. Usually it depends on space for me. And I just kind of keep them separated by color family. And then, when I feel like, oh, get out of there. And then when I feel like I have enough to dye a wildflower batch, I pull out between 4 and 6 skeins and get to work. And it's so much fun. And you really get to get your kind of creativity juices flowing, and it's a really fun surprise too, especially when you've been kind of mixing your dyes like this, because you really have no idea what you're going to get. You kind of have an idea like, okay, this is a reddish and a blue, but other than that, like, it's a fun surprise. So this needs to cook. Put a lot of dye in there, so probably needs to cook for get a half hour. Let's see what's going on over here. So I know from yesterday, from dyeing the tonal of this color, that this blue took a very long time to exhaust. So I am going to just leave this here for a while as well, to just let this kind of do its thing. Yeah, I'd really like one end for it to be like more of like a deeper blue, just to kind of have that nice separation of color, so that we have like good representation of each of our tonal colorways. Because I feel like the dark blue was the one that that I just didn't really see coming out in our variegated skeins. But yeah, so I'm going to keep these here. I do want them to cool completely to room temperature before I wash them. So they get to sit there. And yeah, I'm just going to kind of keep my eye on this. Because I only have one mini skein in here, there is a chance that I have added too much dye. You know, you can only, the yarn can only take up so much, and I don't want, you know, I don't want this to just be a blue skein, you know, a fully saturated blue skein, because we already have our dark blue saturated tonal. So one thing that you can also do is to just add another skein of yarn to this batch to kind of soak up any of that extra dye. So if you have just, you know, kind of like a similar skein that I would use for like my Wildflowers, I might throw just like a skein of yarn in here, and it's going to soak up all that extra dye. And then I can even set that one skein aside to keep dyeing later on in a Wildflowers batch, if that's making sense to you. But I'm starting to see the water turn clear a bit. So I think we're going to be okay. I'm going to put a little bit more in here. I just want to be careful. I don't want to be like manipulating this too much. But, okay, so I'm going to put the lid back on. I think just some heat is going to help things out as well. So that's it. I'm going to end this video for today, but definitely check back. So we will have, I guess, a part 3 where we will sit down together. That'll be, I guess, upstairs in my yarn room. We'll do a big reveal of all of the work that we just did together, so I can show you what the Wildflowers looks like, and especially what our countdown collection looks like that we just created together. I think that it's going to be really fun. So thank you so much for watching. Like always, if you have any questions at all about yarn dyeing, head over to my Discord community. I will link it in the comments. I'm always open to answering your questions. Love chatting about all things yarn, whether that's yarn dyeing, knitting, crocheting, or any kind of fiber related craft. I'm definitely here for it. And more than anything, I'm really, really excited, anxious to know, are you going to try this? And if you do try it, I'd love to see your photos of how your experiment turned out. I think that's the best part. Yeah, to see your work. So please share your work with me. I am megsandco_yarn on Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram. I am on some other socials, but Instagram is usually where you can find me. And I hope to connect with you. And happy yarn dyeing, happy all the yarn things, and see you around. Make sure to like and subscribe so that I know that you like this content and that you want to see more of it. See you next time.